Let's make a beautiful 1-row repeat pattern. This is the vertical herringbone stitch on the knitting loom. You can see it's nice and supple and soft. And when I make it on needles, it's a little bit more dense, but it's still a beautiful design. I have a little bit less stitches on the knitting loom than are used on the needles. You can see it's a little bit softer on the loom. I've had some people comment that the needle one looked a little too stiff for them. So if you like looms, you're going to enjoy this one. There are no pearls on it. It is a bit of a tighter stitch on here, as you can see, but as you knit, it softens up. You can see my flexi loom is pulling in a little bit from that tension. There are some gymnastics moving the stitches around a little bit, but I'm going to show you how to do that easily. And there are no pearls on it again, which I love. It's simply a 1-row repeat that would make a beautiful blanket, a cowl, or a scarf. Today, I'm going to teach you the stitch pattern, and I will have this cowl pattern down at the link below in the video description. Let's begin. Welcome to GoodKnit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. I normally will make a right and left-handed video tutorial, but today you don't really need that. It is a 1-row repeat that you have to work back and forth. So going from right to left, working the stitch that way, and then working from left to right in the same manner is going to produce this stitch. So whether you start with your right hand or your left hand, it doesn't matter. Whether you start on the right or the left, it doesn't matter, because you're going to continue doing the same stitch pattern every time. So I know that's a little bit redundant, but I just want to make sure you understand. But down in the video description below, you can see that link to our blog, and we will have the stitch pattern written up, as well as a pattern for a cowl and all the things that you have here that you see. So right here, we've got our flexi loom. You can use any loom that's in the round or a flat panel. I usually just use this flexi loom here. Let me get this yarn out of the way and connect it. So I have a 3+1 multiple on here. So if you want to make it wider, go ahead and do that. So it's a multiple of 3, and then you're going to add 1 more stitch. This is 25. And to begin, I've just started over here where the stitch marker is. And I've done a chain cast on, and I have a link down below in our video description if you need to know how to do that. So you're going to chain cast on from right to left all the way down here, or left to right. And then when you come back, your foundation row is critical. You're going to put in 1 row of knits. I just used a U-wrap knit, okay? You could use a traditional knit, it doesn't matter. We're going to go all the way back. So we're knitting all the way back for our foundation row, and now we're ready to begin our 1-row repeat. So the first thing you're going to do, grab your loom tool, and you're seeing this obviously as it's already come up. You won't be able to see the benefits of this until you have 2 or 3 inches. It's kind of hard to see this pattern repeat down below. You can see how this is like all squished in here, so it's really hard to tell. But just pay careful attention until you get this technique down. I recommend when you work on this row, finish the row completely and don't start on the next row, because it's hard to pick this up once you put it down in the middle of a row. So go ahead and knit this first stitch here. So stitch 1, that's just knit. After you've knit that stitch, you're going to want to yarn over, but we're going to yarn over directly on the stitch we just created. So go behind the stitch and around in the opposite direction. Okay, and then come back, and that's going to place hold this. We're going to take this off in a little bit. Now we're going to slip this stitch. We're going to leave it right where it is and move our yarn to the back of it. Okay, do not put it in front. That can cause another problem. So I had to do this a couple of times to make sure. Make sure and go behind it first, okay? Or else your stitches will be out of order. Now we're going to knit the next 2 stitches. So we're going to knit 2, 1, 2, and we're going to pick up the first one and move it on top of our slip stitch. Pick up the second one, move it on top of our slip stitch. Then we're going to pass the slip stitch over those 2 stitches. So simply just picking it up and moving it over the top of these 2 stitches. Make sure these are in the correct order, and just going to knit over. Okay, we're going to move these 2 stitches back to their original pegs in the same order. So pick the top one up and move it and place it. You can tighten. Pick this other one up and move it back and place it. And you can go ahead and tighten your stitches. And then you're going to pick up this yarn over, pick it up, it's going to be very loose, and you're going to place it here. So before you move on, you're going to want to tighten your stitches. Go ahead and tighten this first knit stitch here so it tightens up the yarn over, and then pull and tighten the second stitch, and then tighten that up. And you're ready to move on. So let's go through our stitches in order of how I have them written on the blog to make it make sense if you read it on the blog later. So number 1, yarn over and wrap peg before the first peg in your repeat. We're going to call this peg 0, okay? Then we're going to slip 1, which is skipping peg 1 with the yarn behind the peg. And then the next step is knit 2. We're going to knit peg 2 and move the stitch to peg 1. Okay. And then you're going to have 2 loops on peg 1. Then we're going to knit peg 3 and move that new stitch to peg 1. Now we have psso. This is pass the slip stitch over. We're going to knit the bottom loop on peg 1 over the top 2 stitches. We're going to move the top stitch on peg 1 to peg 3. And move the last stitch on peg 1 to peg 2. And move the yarn over on peg 0 to peg 1. So we have pegs 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to start at peg 1 and start tightening these stitches up. So we're going to tighten up the yarn over, then the first knit stitch, then the second knit stitch, and go ahead and snug that up. And you're going to continue with that repeat. So you can do how I did the first time or the second time. Either way works. You're going to begin the same way each time. So yarn over on the peg that you just completed. Okay, yarn over, go behind the next peg, and then knit 2 stitches and move them back. So you can choose to pick them up and move them one by one, or leave them in place, knit both of those stitches, and then move them back to this peg 1. I wouldn't worry too much about whether you're doing a flat knit, a U-wrap, a traditional knit stitch here, because you're going to have to move these stitches around so much and then tighten them up. It won't matter. So do whatever is easier for you and that you can remember how to do it. There we go. So we've done 3 repeats here. And yes, you could put this down, but you may get confused when you come back to it. If you left off on this one here, if you left on this one here, because technically this is the one that I left off on because it almost creeps back to here. So you don't want to mess up your sequence. And it, again, it would be better to go all the way down. Now, you can see once you've done a row before, you can see some of these are looser than other stitches, and those are the yarn overs. So to know that you're still in the right sequence, this will happen every time. When you begin your sequence and you yarn over and slip behind the peg, this very first stitch, once you've gotten on to doing this row the one time, when you come back, the very first stitch is going to be that very loose yarn over, and then the next one is going to be tighter because that's a regular knit stitch. This is harder doing it on the table than in my lap. Okay, so now that I've tightened that, tighten this one, and you can see again, once I've done my yarn over and come back behind here, that very first stitch is going to be that really loose yarn over here. So you're going to continue down to the end. Pause your video, I'll meet you back up, and I'll just show you how to begin again in the other direction, just if you want to see that part. We'll see you in a moment. Okay, so we're ready to begin our second row, which is a repeat of row 1. So we're simply going to knit 1 to begin our repeat. Okay, so now we start a repeat. You yarn over first, then you slip 1. So we'll go behind the peg. We're going to knit 2 stitches and move them onto the slipped stitch and then knit that over. So knit 2 stitches. You can move it now or you can move it in a moment. There we go, we've worked them. Now we move them back. And then we pass the slip stitch over. And now we move the top stitch onto that third peg. And the next stitch onto the second peg. And move our yarn over to that first peg. Tighten up our stitches. And we're ready to begin our repeat. Just yarn over on the stitch you just worked. Oops, go around this way, go behind that peg to slip it, and then work the next stitches and continue. So you can see that it doesn't matter if you're right or left-handed, you just keep going back and forth in the same exact way. I do want to show you what the stitch pattern looks like if you got lost or you had to go backwards. It could be a little bit confusing. Every time you see this yarn over here, you know, it's really loose. It doesn't look like it directly engages with the stitch. I mean, to me, my brain doesn't see it right. So when I see this stitch right here, it looks like all alone. It looks like it's maybe even coming from the wrong direction. And that's just because the stitches had to get pulled so tight. It pulls back so far back this way, but I promise it ends up working out well back here. And you can see how this stitch looks. So it looks a little chaotic here, and that's okay. When you're ready to finish out your stitch pattern, you just go obviously to the end of the row, and then you can bind off as usual, bind off nice and light and easy, and just stitch it together, sew it together with your end to form the cowl, and that is it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this stitch tutorial today. Be sure and check out the needle one if you prefer to use needles, and don't be afraid to use it on the reverse and sew something in on the back, because that back is beautiful. Look at that. Check it out. It's so pretty. I love both. So tell me what you think about this stitch. Let me know down in the comments below. We'll see you soon. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.